Bonjour à tous, good morning colleagues. On va attendre quelques minutes que les uns les autres se connectent. Donc, attendons 1 ou 2 minutes. So let's wait for 1 or 2 minutes that participant connects before we start the webinar. With your permission, I think we can start while waiting for that to connect. If you agree, can we start?
Yeah, I think, Chair, we should start. The practice is that people will join. I think by the time we do the intros, people will have come in. I'm sure we'll be sitting close to 100. We have got 63 right now, which is a good number. I think we should start.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, afternoon, good evening. Thanks to those who have already joined us. Let's start our webinar. Before we start, please take note of the following housekeeping logistics. First, if you have any technical issues during the discussion today, please share them via chat and a member of our team will try to help you. We ask for your patience to allow for some delays due to internet connectivity. Secondly, we invite you to participate in our discussion by sharing any questions or comments with the panelists through the chat window. Tap your message in the chat box. You can also ask for the floor to share your country experience and ask for questions. Ask questions. Thirdly, simultaneous interpretation is available in English and French. You have to select your preferred language by clicking on the appropriate icon as indicated on the screen. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared on the event webpage as well as the presentations. In today's webinar, we will receive presentation on Beyond Big Data, Modernizing Administrative Data for Statistical Purposes. Without further ado, let's start the webinar. Let me give the floor to our moderator, Mr. Oliver Chingania, the African Center for Statistics Director. I therefore invite Mr. Chingania for its introductory message and to chair this session.
Thank you very much, Leandro. Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And I want to welcome everyone that is joined here. Really, it's a big honor that we have this kind of audience and that we are doing jointly with other agencies, as you'll be hearing in subsequent discussions. So thank you for joining us. I want to welcome you to our 10th session of the StatsTalk Africa. StatsTalk Africa is a monthly webinar series launched by the Africa Center for Statistics as a space for dialogue about data, statistics, innovative tools with data experts and users. It is a knowledge sharing and exchange platform for experts, and this is why you're here today. data practitioners, data enthusiasts, the academia, and others interested to learn about the new developments in the data sphere. The previous StatsTalk Africa sessions focused on demystifying issues, among others, around big data for official statistics, large language models, and their application in official statistics, geospatial information, data science, among others. These have allowed an improved understanding among participants who have come to the webinars in what is actually happening in the data sphere across the continent and beyond. But today, the StatsTalk Africa is on modernizing administrative data sources for statistical purposes, which is really another critical area that needs to be deeper, to have deeper understanding of what is actually going on there and to be able to appreciate. So the question is, why do we want to focus on administrative data sources? I think one key lesson learned from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the operations of the National Statistical System in Africa is the vulnerability of the statistical systems. And we saw what happened. A number of them shut down because of not being able to withstand the situation. COVID-19 showed that our system needs to move away from the current traditional ways of doing business to be able to effectively support Africa's and national statistical development and the transformative agenda. National statistical systems require to be transformed and modernized to be more agile and resilient to able to withstand crises such as COVID-19. The roadmap for the transformation and modernization of visual statistics in Africa from 2023 to 2030, which was prepared by the Africa Center for Statistics at ECA to guide and support countries and partners in this process, stipulates that adoption and use of new data sources are critical in the modernization process. The integration of administrative data sources in official statistics is of great importance in this regard. A critical part of the transformation and modernizing of national statistical system is using and adapting new technology, new methodologies and approaches, including the use of other sources of data, such as administrative data. Nowadays, large amounts of data are collected automatically or manually in connection with routine operations, including credit and card use, electronic tickets, traffic surveillance, and radio frequency identification of commodities, shopping in markets, self-delivery, among others. Although the information and the data primarily collected to carry out various non-statistical programs, such as routine operation and self-delivery, they are responsible for potential sources for official statistics. Considerable efforts have been made over the years, including the education and as well as the health sectors. Information systems in several countries have made it possible to harness data collected to produce quality official statistics for these sectors. Other sectors have ongoing activities such as in justice, civil registration, and vital statistics. However, the national statistical systems in Africa have yet to fully embrace and use the potential of administrative data. In contrast, these sources offer several advantages, including high-frequency disaggregated data, critical in the SDG context of leaving no one behind. Reduced production costs as data are collected routinely in the context of administrative activities, and decreased respondents' burden. So let's sort of be able to understand why administrative data is not being used. I think in our view that these issues relate to perceived quality of data, nature of compiling and collecting, including use of administrative data in statistical production. These problems relate to different, mainly different maybe in terms of measurement, the units themselves, the concepts that are being used, the definitions of variables, the differences in the classifications, excuse me, inadequate data quality, a lack of statistical know-how, and the need for additional data checking. So there are also requirements to access to and also acquisition of administrative data. These include appropriate legal frameworks, technical frameworks, cooperation within administrative data providers, the public approval for government use of administrative data, and the preparation and facilities of national statistical offices. The challenges with administrative data sources require that national statistical office invests a little bit more in modernizing the processes through the data value chain. In the whole process of the data value chain, actually, to be much more precise. To support and accompany this effort, ECA mobilized resources from the European Union through the Eurostat to launch a program on SDG monitoring in Africa, which supports the modernization of administrative data sources to enhance their use for statistical processes. Activities under this program aim to support countries in reducing the data gap, to monitor and evaluate progress made on SDGs as well as Agenda 2063. So for today's webinar, we want to see an example of register-based official statistics production from Norway and how it was developed. This model is one of the best in the world, as more than 90% of official statistics are produced from administrative data sources. So surveys are conducted only for residual statistics, for which data cannot be obtained for administrative data. As such, a census can be conducted daily in Norway and for the Nordic country. We will have two presentations today. First will be delivered by Botek Sadek-Kwesi, a senior statistics advisor for Norway, Statistics Norway, based in Ethiopia. He will present a case of Norway's register-based statistics. The second presentation will focus on the current status and future of national statistical, the future of national African National Population Register by William, who is the chief of the demographic and social statistics at ECA within the Africa Center for Statistics. So really, I would like to urge that we all actively participate in this particular session today, and as really this is a good stepping stone in terms of how do we use and modernize our the administrative data, and win off maybe in time on some of the survey data that surveys that are being undertaken. So with that, I just want to thank you for this message before I proceed. Thank you very much. I would like now to proceed, since I've also been commissioned as moderator, to invite one of our guests, Jen. Ms. Jen Euclin is the head of the Division for International Development Cooperation Statistics, Norway. Jen is currently the head of the Division for International Development Cooperation Statistics, Norway, since September 2020. She started her career in 2025 within Stats Norway, and since then she has also worked for 4 years for Eurostat and 3 years at the UN World Food Programme in Egypt and Tajikistan. In Statistics Norway, Jane has worked with national accounts and business statistics, two domains where administrative data is important data source. This has given her a hands-on experience of combining survey data with administrative data, and she has been a daily user of statistical business data in Norway. Now leading a division of international cooperation, the aim is to share the SSB's experience with partner countries who use statistical registers and use administrative data for statistical process. So without further ado, let me hand over to you, Jen, to give us your remarks, and please turn on your camera so that we can honor you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver. So I have also a short presentation. I will share my screen. Let me see, just give me 1 minute and make sure it works fine. So can you just confirm that you can see the screen okay?
Yes, we can see the screen. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So thank you also for inviting me to this statistics talk on the important topic of modernizing administrative data for the statistical purposes. This is a topic that is at the heart of how we work in Statistics Norway, as we have what you can describe as a register-based system. Although we still carry out a large number of surveys, we receive information from more than 100 registers for production of statistics. So, at the center of our system is the 3 core registers covering the population, businesses, and properties. A key element to the success of building a register-based system is the ability to link data across different sources. So in Norway, every person and business have a unique identifier, making it easier to merge information from different sources. And the early digitalization of the public administration in Norway and the common belief that the benefit of reusing and sharing data has contributed to establishing this system. Still, it has taken time and effort. The system has been developed over several decades, almost 60 years, and it continuously on development to adapt to new data sources and technologies. So already back in 1964, a central population register was established as a separate unit within Statistics Norway. It was partially based on data from the 1960 census, and every resident was assigned a personal identification number. Gradually, the system was improved over the years in a stepwise approach, leading to the first fully register-based census in 2011. So, of course, those starting to use administrative data today can move much faster, luckily. And we will later hear from Sadiq a bit more details on how we build our systems. In addition to the administrative data, we are also using big data and alternative data sources, which are increasingly important areas for statistical production. Getting access to and using new data sources for statistical purposes is a central element of the strategy of Statistics Norway. So, in today's fast-evolving data ecosystem, the rapid development of technologies provides both opportunities and challenges for statistical agencies. Continuous improving and modernizing the statistical production process is now part of the work culture for most statistical offices. So I want to highlight some of the preconditions that have been central for the use of administrative data in Norway. So first, the legal base. Legislation provides a foundation for the use of administrative data sources for statistical purposes. National legislation must reflect the broadly held view that it is common good sense to take advantage of existing administrative data sources rather than recollecting data for statistical purposes. So collecting data only once and reusing it. The Statistics Act gives us the right to access administrative data and to link them with other administrative registers for statistical purposes. This right was extended in the new Statistics Act in 2019 to also include privately held data. So secondly, the public approval and trust is essential, and this is closely linked to information security and confidentiality. The increasing number of administrative registers and data sources underlines the need of data confidentiality and protection of privacy for all citizens. It also creates a need from us to create awareness among the public of how we safeguard the data. The large amount of data received may lead to the misleading impression that the statistical office can or want to study single citizens. We must ensure the data are managed in a safe manner and without the possibility of our staff to observe private information for separate citizens. Our mission and legal basis is to aggregate, to study groups, geographic distribution, or developments over time for relevant phenomena in society. Confidentiality is not only a legal requirement, but one of our core values. So therefore, we need proper information security systems and policies. And we want to make sure that we integrate privacy protection in all relevant parts of the production value chain. Furthermore, we must also explain our mandate and missions in the public debate. I also want to point out some details from our legal act. So as mentioned, the Statistical Act gives us the right to access registers. But in addition, it also gives us the right to influence registers. That means that Statistics Norway can influence the choice of standards and variable definitions, ensuring better coherence across the data sources. For example, it ensures that the same version of the Norwegian standard for industrial classification is used across registers. Furthermore, data owners are obliged to notify Statistics Norway in case of changes. This gives us the possibility to contribute to the development of new registers and also the time to adjust or react if changes to existing registers have implication for the production of statistics. While the legal framework gives us the tools to access and influence registers, with regards to improving the quality of administrative data, we have found that close cooperation with data owners or data holders have been the key to success. So to fully benefit from administrative data, the quality of the data is important. Until 2012, Statistics Norway only corrected errors from administrative data when it arrived in-house in the statistical version of the registers. And we gave little feedback to the data holders with regards to errors and quality. However, while preparing for the first register-based population housing census, which was carried out in 2011, the challenges encountered inspired a change in our approach. It was clear that to be able to make any significant improvement in the quality of administrative data, it would be necessary to correct errors in the source, not only in the statistical register. So in 2012, we established a new approach, signing formal agreements with data owners, while also committing Statistics Norway to provide feedback through annual quality reports to the data owners. So this allowed data owners to repair errors in the source, avoiding the same error being reported repeatedly, while also improving the quality of the administrative register to the benefit of the data owner. This approach has made a big difference in improving the quality in registers. So as mentioned, the focus on cooperation, coordination, and communication has been key factors to increase the quality of administrative data. So this includes, for example, the annual meeting at top management level, regular meeting at the technical level, and the use of working groups as needed. The system of formal agreements with data owners were evaluated in 2020. The evaluation found that the approach has been a success and confirmed the data owners also see the benefit of sharing data with Statistics Norway. And they found that the quality reports...
if it's okay, maybe you can bring it here.
Sorry.
Yes, please. So I can eat while I'm in the meeting.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Oliver, your mic is on.
Oh yeah, sorry. Okay,
continue.
It was not. I can continue. Okay, thank you. So yeah. So overall, this has led to an improvement in the quality of registers, both in Statistics Norway and for data owners, creating a benefit for both partners. So today, Statistics Norway produce more than 100 annual quality reports, one for each register, and we have a dedicated register group to follow up the work. So this approach has been highlighted as an example of best practice in the European statistical system following the last round of peer reviews. So in particular, it points out the formal agreement at top management level and the focus on quality in the data, the source, trust, and cooperation. So the new and dynamic data ecosystem with rapid digital transformation and technological advancements poses both challenges and possibilities. On one side, new data sources and technologies provide opportunities for improvements in the production of official statistics. For example, new data sources can lead to more timely statistics. On the other side, actors outside the NSS are challenging the NSO's role as a predominant producer of statistics. As more and more data become available, almost everyone can compile their own statistics, now also with the help of artificial intelligence tools. So in this environment, it is imperative for the NSOs to preserve their uniqueness by adhering to the fundamental principle of official statistics, which is why I'm making a point on this in this slide. The FPOS sets out 10 main principles that all members of the statistical system should follow, ensuring the reliability, accuracy, and impartiality of official statistics that differentiates it from other statistics. It is crucial that the NSO, in the process of modernizing, while being innovative, exploring new data sources and technologies, is still upholding the fundamental principle of official statistics, including the data quality and confidentiality. So the final slide. The collaboration and cooperation are key factors for the modernization of the NSO and the NSS. It is simply not possible for a statistical agency to achieve the transformation alone. The NSOs are already cooperating with a large number of national and international stakeholders, including the data owners and data holders, and of course the users of statistics, such as the general public, the media, government and policymakers, private sectors, and international organizations. The process of modernizing will require closer cooperation and additional advocacy and communication efforts towards these stakeholders. To succeed with modernization, the management of the statistical offices should take a proactive role in the national discussions and provide advice to policymakers on developing the national data ecosystem. After all, the statistical office is best placed to advise on how new data sources can be used to produce statistics. In addition, it should also advise on how the use of administrative data sources for statistics can benefit both the public administration with better administrative data and the general public with better services, while at the same time be the source for better and more timely official statistics to the benefit of all. So finally, international cooperation is an essential part of the official statistical system, as this quote also points out. So the key partners, like the UNECA, is central for coordinating and sharing information and establishing forums for exchange, like today's StatsTalk. Today's discussion will shed light on the use of administrative data sources for statistics and provide valuable insight into the challenges and opportunities presented by the evolving data landscape. In conclusion, by embracing technological innovations, fostering collaboration, and upholding the principle of official statistics, the national statistical offices can succeed in modernizing their statistical production system with integrity and reliability. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Jane. I think that's very useful presentation. I think you've heard for yourselves there what has been said. So I'm not going to really try and summarize, but I think just to thank you for that excellent talk in terms of what's been done at the Norway Statistical Office. So let me go straight into the presentation and allow a presentation that's going to come next, which is entitled Register-Based Statistics in Nordic Countries, the Case of Norway by Sadiq. Sadiq Kwesi Boteng is a senior statistical advisor at the division of the Division of the International Development Corporation in Statistics Norway, a long-term advisor to the Ethiopian Statistics Service. Sadiq started a career with Statistics Norway in 2000, and since then worked with other international organizations in statistical capacity, among institutions Eurostat from 2004 to 2008. From 2018, Sadiq has worked as a senior statistician for UNHCR, a role that he took in to 3 regions: the East Horn of Africa and the Great Lakes region, Asia Pacific, and most recently Southern Africa. He is an expert in migration and displacement statistics, and supported many countries in Asia and Africa, including refugees, internally displaced, and stateless population in census and large-scale national surveys. Supporting the use of administrative data is an important part of most of the locations and the institutions, and Sadiq has worked over the last many years. This has been done in individual, national, as well as international organizations, as well as regional economic bodies. So without further ado, I would like to give Boteng time to also give his presentation. Sadiq, please.
Thank you very much, Oliver, and I will try to, I'm not very used to Zoom, but I'll try to see, to share my screen here.
Please.
Yes, let's see. William is here to support me. Share screen, right?
You might be, William is a star in these things, so he's on Zoom every day.
So William is here to, and then, okay. Okay. Oh, no, they share. Yeah, okay. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. See, William is here to support me. Let's see. Okay. Yes. Hello. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Hello?
I can see the screen.
So, yes, and it's in presentation mode. Thank you very much, Oliver, and thank you very much, Jan, from Oslo, for putting the presentation in a very good order, because Jan actually mentioned the core importance of administrative registers, and then of course what it entails to have such a unique kind of and a very elaborate source of data. And in Statistics Norway, we really cannot think beyond. We cannot really use only surveys, like you said. I mean, we are so much used to administrative registers that it's also, apart from statistics, it also becomes a way of life as well. And so every individual in the country has a unique number, like Jan said, and all services are connected and integrated. And so it's really not becomes only like a theoretical aspect, it's also a very practical aspect. Most Norwegians, most Scandinavians live within the register system, I may say, because every aspect of their life is connected or integrated into this system. And so for me today, I think what I would do is to provide a short history of our register-based statistics, where we were, how we got here, and then I'd also look at some of the conditions. And Jan has already mentioned some of the conditions already, but to see in practice, how do we put this all together? And then of course, we also see all our stakeholders, how Statistics Norway goes about our daily activities in maintaining such an elaborate system. And then finally, I would also give 2 examples of how we use administrative data to produce statistics. And then I would also end by looking at the African situation. And like Oliver mentioned, I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work in Africa over the past couple of years. Even though within the UNHCR system, I was still within statistics, and I had the opportunity to cooperate with national statistical offices. I've been part of regional bodies, IGAD, EAC, UNESCO, and all these regional bodies that involved in statistics. And so for firsthand, I've also seen developments that are also taking place in Africa. So the administrative data situation in Africa is not static. It's not like old-fashioned either. There's quite a number of opportunities here. And in the last part of my presentation, we will look at some of these opportunities. We'll also look at the challenges and see the way forward. So I would start by, yes, just giving a general overview of what I want to talk about. Like I said, I'll talk about a broad history of register-based statistics in Norway, the data ecosystem, and then of course, some of the best practices that we also use. And of course, Jan mentioned the data quality. The trust in the system is also connected very much to the data quality. The data quality, the data protection. This aspect is extremely important, and any modernization efforts, the data quality and data protection should be at the core. And like I already said, I'll provide examples of how we use administrative sources to produce statistics. And here I'll look at the migration data, and then I also look at our register-based censuses. And of course, there's no perfect system. And so our system, in as much as it's the Nordic model is lauded, and a lot of people talk so positively about it, we also have our own challenges as well, because there's no perfect system. And so I'll look at some of the challenges associated with the registers in Norway, and we have similar systems in other Nordic countries as well. And then, like I said, I would also look at improving the use of administrative data for statistics in Africa. And then we'll go together, we'll look at the way forward and how we can also get closer towards improving and modernizing administrative data sources for Africa. So yes, looking at the data sources, like Jan has already explained, and I'm also reiterating this, we have quite a high number, over 100 data producers. And all these, all the data producers, we have arrangements with them, we have agreements with them. And so Statistics Norway is really quite important in even the production process. And so like you can see on the screen, we have the administrative systems, and then we have other data as well. We don't only use administrative data. We have some surveys, we have some other data that we combine. And so we get this data from the sources. They come into Statistics Norway. We edit, we work on the data, and then this data then comes out as official statistics. And so Statistics Norway being in the middle, and because of the new statistical law, Janne mentioned it, that is very important. This means that we are able to influence the source of the data. When I was home and I was working for education and skill statistics, I was part of the technical team of the Directorate of Education. What it meant was that any new registers, any databases that the Director of Education had, I was part of that technical team. So what it meant is that at the source, we could also influence what was being produced, even at our producers level. When ISCED when international standards come, it's also our responsibility to make sure that it is disseminated to the national level. And so we are all part of the technical aspect of our data producers as well. And there are regular meetings where we discuss not only the register, but the quality issues and our needs and demands and whatever challenges that we have. And Janne put it very well that we have these meetings both at the management level and at the technical level. And it's a very high level of cooperation. And so any new system, this aspect is very important, the coordination, the importance of being part of the data source. These are all extremely important. It's not only at the data end, how do we get data from the registers, but we also have to think of how we can influence even the source of the data and how these are all put together. And all that we do is also embedded in best practices from Europe. Both Janne and myself have passed in Eurostat. Norway, even though it's not a member of the EU, we are a member of the EEA. So it means that all the rules and regulations and frameworks of official statistics from the European Union, we follow to the core. And so all our quality aspects and all the framework is all taken from the European framework as well, especially from the administrative data sources. Janne mentioned the peer review. So we also put ourselves out there that the peer review, we also reviewed regularly. And there are reports out there for everybody to read on how Statistics Norway is doing in terms of international statistical guidelines. And this we follow, and we are always proud of the very fact that we always get good reviews from these peer reviews. And whatever challenges that they discover in the peer reviews, we do our best to be able to work on them and then to improve our statistics. Part of the aspect that we do is also we have all these written agreements in terms of our obligations, the obligations of the data producers, and then the rules and conducts. And we have over 30 of such agreements. And like we said, in Statistics Norway, we believe in the practical aspect of our rules and regulations. So our frameworks are not just there, we are out there, we are part of technical committees, we influence the data flow, we influence the data sources, and we are also, because of the statistical law, we are also able to get information on any future changes. They are obliged to inform Statistics Norway. And then we also reach out. And so there's a very strong collaboration between all the data producers and Statistics Norway through all these written rules, agreements, and frameworks. And then when we get the data in-house, we then link the data from different sources. And the core is the statistical population register. And here you can see from the screen that we have all the details here. We have from crime to child welfare. Then we have the international surveys, both LFS and SILK. We have the economic assistance. We have national insurance, income and wealth, education, the labor market. And so all these information comes in and we're able to link them. The key to the link up is mainly the PIN system, where all individuals, businesses, and households have unique numbers. And this really helps us to put everything together. And then it also helps us to be able to get to find errors very quickly. Because when you know, if you have the PIN numbers and we are able to connect and integrate registers, it's really quite easy to be able to for early detection of any errors that might come. We are at a conference in civil registration and vital statistics, William and myself, and this have been mentioned in terms of trying to find how we can use civil registers to check also the population. For example, when you see the gender, the sex, and the male sex ratio from civil registration. From there, immediately you should be able to know that probably there's something wrong with the data that's been collected. And so having the PIN where everybody is counted, all businesses are part of the integrated process and all households are also part, this really enhances the data quality at all levels. Yes, and then now we can also come into the real aspect of the data quality, which is actually the core. Like I already mentioned, there are formal agreements with the data owners, quality reports, and regular intervals. So we don't only just look, okay, we have a perfect or nesting perfect system, like people say, it's nothing perfect. And so we work actively towards improving the system. Yana mentioned innovation and technological advancement. We put it on board. And so all the new data that is coming, big data, other sources of data, we are constantly on the lookout of improving the Nordic model or the register model that we have. And so we have all these regular meetings. If there are any issues or any new legislation, either from the international or national, we embed it in the process. And so we always have these deliveries and then of course the frequencies as well. So we know every data producer, what is being collected and how these are being channeled and how do we get it in Statistics Norway. And so we are part of all these discussions, and quality is the core. Of course, that's also the dialogue with the data owners is also extremely important. We have our meetings, the annual meetings, and like I mentioned earlier, the most important is the joint working groups, both at the management level and at the technical level. And here we also discuss all the new IT solutions and development as well. And then apart from working and putting in place all the quality issues to protect our data and then to improve and reduce the sources of error, we also evaluate even the quality aspect as well. We evaluate the quality assessment. And so we have all these quality reports. Currently we have over 100 reports that are linked to the 29 agreements that we have. And there's a dedicated group in Statistics Norway that works mainly with the quality. We also have our focus group and internal, external users as well. And so we have all this where we can also ask the external users, how do they see the system and how is the system working? So it is not, we self-evaluate ourselves, we self-evaluate ourselves, and we also allow others, both our users and the international community like peer review, to review our process as well. And all the quality, and it's also out there. And so transparency is extremely important. So the people of Norway trust the Norwegian statistical system because they know that we protect the data and we do whatever it takes to be able to protect the individual. Since there are PIN numbers and the system can be vulnerable if all these framework, if all these guidelines are not put in place, we know about the dangers and we know about countries that have misused some of these registers. And so Norway, we make sure that our, not only the laws, but in practice as well. Every staff of Statistics Norway goes through this process. We sign all these declarations, whether you're a former staff or you have left the institution, you are still binded by these agreements. And so the non-disclosure aspect is extremely important because we have this rich source of data and we have all these quality reports. And so we evaluate the producers. We are also evaluated by others. And so the quality chain is around and we all feed into it, and we all contribute towards a win-win situation. Now I'll talk about the administrative data for the production of statistics. Yana mentioned, and then of course Oliver also mentioned as well, that we have a central statistical system. 85% of covered. We have the legal framework, and then of course it also means that Statistics Norway we also we can produce and disseminate data, and as much as possible make it a common good for everybody. And so you see that in Norway, apart from data, is actually very much used. Anywhere I travel around the world, I mentioned that the trust in the Nordic model, the trust in the register-based system is not only the fact that researchers use it. Ordinary people, if you listen to the political discourse in Norway, everybody quotes Statistics Norway figures in all fields: economy, the crime rate, immigration. So it's a trusted source, and it's trusted because of all these frameworks and guidelines have been put in place. And it's not static, it's modernizing all the time. And each year, all innovations are put into practice. And then it's also transparent. And so on our website, we produce data, lots of data for the ordinary Norwegian or the ordinary international person to be able to go into our systems and to be able to find data for themselves and to use for policy planning and then for the press as well. So you could see here that just to show you an overview of our population register and the various data that feeds into it. So we have the Nordic registration system for immigration. We have the persons register where we have the names and all the civil registration aspects that are connected to this. Of course, we have the police, the immigration department, births and deaths registry. We have the marriages, and then we have also our foreign missions also pushing. And then we also have the Norwegian Map Authority that maps businesses, households, and all that. And so all these are kind of put together into an integrated approach, and then we have all this as part of our population register. The beauty about this is that this is now it's automated. And so no papers are moved around, all these things. When you move from one area to the other, you go online, register, automatically this information is fed into another system that feeds into the population register. And it's also very sophisticated, meaning that our National Central Population Register is actually synchronized every night. And so every day we have an update, we have updates on it, and that makes it quite rich. And so we have really up-to-date information. And this is the reason why we can now confidently also run censuses without really thinking about the time frame. We can actually go into any time, stop the time, and to be able to see immediately what is the status of businesses, individuals, households in Norway. Yeah, and so an example is to really to see, for example, if you want to find long-term migrants in Norway, for example. So we have the Nordic migration, then that this also feeds into, we have the Directorate of Immigration, who also collects data on applications for visa, resident permits, and all this. This also is fed into our population register. So it means that because of their individual personal number, we really can follow individuals. So for example, I could be in my office and see immigrants that came to Norway maybe 20 years ago, and to see what is happening to them. And because of the integration of the systems, we're able to also follow the reintegration into our society and even the welfare of the different population groups. I quite remember when I was still back home in Norway and I was working with education and skills statistics, we could, for example, see to be able to measure the educational level of immigrants that came like 15 years ago and their descendants. And like Yana mentioned, all this, the personal number is also connected to generations, meaning that the personal number is connected to your parents, their parents, and so we could actually follow all the individuals and connect their education, their health information, their labor information. I remember one of the work that we did that was really quite interesting was to look at the background of medical doctors who completed a particular year. So we wanted to see the intergenerational aspect, to see whether their parents were also medical doctors. And we can do this because of the way our data is linked. The population data can be linked to education data, and it can be linked to income. And so we can confidently look at immigrants that came to Norway and how their welfare is. How are they integrated into the Norwegian society? How many of them have acquired higher education? How many of them are working compared with different population groups? We can compare non-immigrant population and compare it with the immigrant population. We can do time series. And so all these aspects are done because we have this system that feeds into a central population register, and the key being the personal numbers, as we call it. Yeah, so you can see even more clearly here in terms of population, what it entails, the country of birth, and then the country of birth for parents. All this information we have into very detailed. that we could also use. And of course, like I said, we could also look at the reasons for migration. So whether you came as a student, as a refugee, humanitarian grounds, or family reunion. So this is the chart here just shows just an example of what we can do. With the data that we have. And so this shows immigrants by the reason for immigration from 95 to 2001. So you can see, we can just plot out those who came because of labor reasons, family reunions, refugees, and then education. And like I said, this is just a basic. We could also add on to many other dimensions in terms of transitions to labor, income, and comparison with different population groups. My second example of the use of administrative registers is the census. And if you see here from the 2010 census rounds, you can see that a large majority were actually the traditional census. Then there are some combinations, and then there are some who are also using register-based censuses. And what we also know about censuses is, of course, how expensive they are. Like I said, I've been part of these IGAD regional bodies. I've also been part of a few African countries that we supported the census, including 2019 in Kenya. Census. So census is a very expensive venture, and not all African countries are even able to follow the 10-year cycle. There are some countries that either they cannot afford, or it's also because of security reasons. So for several reasons, not all countries are able to even follow the 10-year cycles. And so there's a need for us to look at other areas of conduct, or other methods of conducting censuses. So like you see, the Nordic approach have been, for over 50 years. And Jan put it very right that it didn't start from today, 64, and there have been many years since we started collecting data and having a rich source of registered data. And this has actually enabled us to be able to do what we do effectively. And if you look at the historical background of censuses, from as early as 1769, and then of course 64 is where it really occurred, where we had a central population register and then the unique number. This was a game changer. Of course, 1970 we still had it, and then also establishing our education database. 1980 census, of course, 1990, 2001. Then, of course, when we came to 2011, this is also another shift where we had 100% based on administrative registers. And this is really quite important. And so it means that we have now gone over from the traditional census to 100% coverage using our administrative censuses. So let's look at some of the advantages. Why we went on to register-based censusing and what we have achieved from that. 2001, we had 10 to 15 permanent and 30 to 4 for data collection. The cost was about 14.6 million euros. And so per head, we had about 3.2. And then now let's compare it to when we went over to register-based census. Only 23 persons working in a census. So you could understand, from the upper span perspective, if you think of census and the large number of people, and then you see here 2011, you see the number of people in the census, it really tells it all. Of course, there were additional costs associated with it. And like Jan said, at that point, we also saw that we should also influence editing of the data at the producer level as well, not only when it comes to UNHCR. When it comes to Statistics Norway. And so there were some efforts that were done as well, such a way that our process, the quality check, was now extended to the producer, where we could also influence and do changes in the registers. But even with all that, the average was 0.3 euro per person compared to 3.2. And the more we innovate and the more we get more smarter ways of doing things, the cost also would then come down. And so there's a huge advantage. Apart from the total coverage, it's also important cost-wise. So now let's look at the register, the system that we used in the 2011 census. Of course, we have our National Population Register. We have the register for buildings. We have the business register, the labor register, education, the national insurance, income, and then the register of vehicles, among others. But like I said, it's not all rosy. I mean, it's not a perfect system. There's no perfect system. There are some issues that I'll point out here. There are some late registrations and there are no registries, because this is also built on trust. It means that when I move out of Norway, when I moved from Pretoria to Addis to take up a new position, it is up to me to now go into our system and then fill out a form and say, I have moved. If I don't do it, it's not captured. And so it's also, so these are some of the gaps as well. And you find a large number of students, for example, moving between cities, and some people also move and they do not actually go in. And so even though these are not very huge numbers, there are also some sources of issues as well. And of course, where people move to is also one of our major, the immigration. So the country of the next residence also becomes, people can move, but not necessarily, we don't really know where they go. And of course, if there are secondary movements, that also becomes a bit of a problem. But a large majority of movements in Norway are to our other Nordic countries. And so the approach is that we have also a Nordic database that captures people that move within these countries. And since a large majority of the movements are within our Nordic neighbors, this is also partly solved through that process as well. Another aspect is the residency requirements. Students can choose whether they want to register at the place of study or at home with their parents. And so we have quite a few of these aspects as well. Sorry, this as well. And in addition to this, we also get data that is also missing. There are some register that comes and then the data is not what is required that we have asked for or what is in the document. And so there can be some changes and we find these errors during our editing process. And so there's a lot of going up and down with this. And I must also admit that one of the challenges of this system is also it's expensive. And so when you are putting up such a system, it involves a lot, especially because of the coordination aspect is really very important. And so the cost aspect is also, even though we save money from not conducting surveys, we also need to high qualified people to update the system. And we are constantly looking for innovative ways as well to improve the system that also cost money. Now let's look at the African situation. And like I said, I've been fortunate enough to be part of the couple of years to work in Africa and coordinating both from the UNHCR perspective, but having a very high level of cooperation with regional bodies and with NSOs. So, and from my own experience, this is just from my own experience, data sources in Africa still remain predominantly surveys. And of course, censuses are very costly. And I know a number of countries have not been able to maintain the 10-year cycle. Some statistics are currently being produced from administrative sources. It exists. I was also part of there is a Statistics Sweden African Union StatsTalk project on migration that across Africa. And this is one of the projects I've been fortunate enough to be connected to. And both the EAC and then IGAD, the migration reports that came out. And in most of these bodies, this was the first time migration reports were produced. I mean, at that level, I mean, using different data sources. And here we could see that there is potential because administrative data was used in some of these reports. Movements of students between the EAC countries, residence permits, and the student permits. So a lot of these are available and really can be used. And like we also see technology is increasing. Ian mentioned artificial intelligence. Now we have big data. And so all this combined, and like Mr. Oliver also said, COVID also taught us that we can be vulnerable. During the COVID time, we couldn't actually do our traditional data collections. And so we need to think of innovative areas. How do we then find other data sources, data integration, getting more data, telephone interviews. So we started thinking of outside the box. And I think this is really quite important for the African as well. And for me, my experience is that there are data in Africa. There's administrative data. There are a lot of registration processes, ID systems. A lot of the countries have their own ID system. My own country, Ghana, has now introduced our national ID system for the very first time, and it's being integrated into the civil registry system as well. and we're also trying to get to a unique number. And so you could see, and in East Africa as well, there are a lot of efforts where registrations, the Huduma number in Kenya, there are a lot of efforts where registers are being put, things are being registered. And so we know that they are data. The most important is that this data sharing is also a problem. And we also know that there's more to be done in order to make these systems, modernize them in order to produce data. So now let's look at the way forward. The way forward is continuous dialogue, and like we're doing now, putting the issue out there and to say censuses and surveys are good, but they are costly. It is time for us to look beyond this and to be able to find other sources. So it's quite important. UNECA, the UN Statistical Office in New York, and a lot of other regional bodies are already involved in guidelines to improve administrative registers and producing of data. So this is not new. And I believe that the African continent has already started. What we need is, of course, maybe more quality guidelines on the quality assessments, and also to be able to see what is happening out there. There are some countries that have been personally also part of where even within departments, sharing of data is difficult. I mean, even within, I was part of some of the regional bodies where some of the state organizations were not willing to actually give our data to other state organizations. So the data sharing, the agreements, and back to the trust element as well, the trust of the people in the system, transparency, data protection, all these aspects are very, very important. And we cannot do this without technological advancement. There are a lot of innovative ways. There are best practices out there, and we have got new methods of data quality, data protection that needs to be put in on this aspect. Integration of administrative registers and surveys is extremely important. And of course, we cannot do this without capacity building and sharing of best practices for to modernize the system that we already have. And so I believe that we can. It's possible for us to modernize African administrative data sources and to be able to integrate. But what we need are the conditions that Yanni already started. We need to have the legal framework, we need to have the trust, we need to have the technological system, we need to have the infrastructure, and we also need the goodwill of the people to trust that these systems their data is protected and these systems can be used. And of course, international cooperation is also the order of the day. We need to cooperate. We need to share. We need to share in our practices, and we need people to actually. So, what Statistics Norway we're doing, some of our is also actually picking directly. We have steady visits from some of these partner countries coming to Norway, not only reading about that, but to see how our system works. And so we have a number of steady visits where people come to Norway, we take them to the data producers, we show them the technology, how we do all this, and how these are all combined in Statistics Norway. And so I think all these efforts from the UNS's position, from UNECA, and from our regional bodies, and also from the NSOs themselves, I think we can move this forward. And there is a goal, and I really believe that this can be done. So on this one, I think I'll end here. And then thank you very much for having this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very, very detailed presentation, and I'm sure people have questions. We've seen the kind of memorandum, a lot of work that has gone into, first of all, great trust and credibility with the users with whom you have been able to go to have MOUs with them. This is really commendable. But I am asking colleagues to put your questions in the chat or on your notes, so that when it's Q&A, you'll be able to raise your questions in the meantime. So I would like to go straight to the next presentation that is going to be presented on the title, Current Status and the Future of National Population Registers in Africa. Chief William Muhaba was going to make the presentation. William is the Chief of Demography and Social Statistics Section in the Africa Center for Statistics at UNECA. He holds a doctorate in medical demography from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Science in the University of London. He's a demographer and has worked with the national statistical offices, universities, and international organizations. His current capacity leads to the section that has the core function of supporting countries in the collection, production, analysis, and use of demographic and social data collected through census, civil registration, and population registers and household surveys. He's coordinating the Africa Program for Accelerated Improvement of CRVS, which has an objective to provide management and programmatic guidance to the African agenda of reforming and improving CRVS system. The regional program provides guidance on the institutional and operational linkages, workflows, and results management mechanism in a more comprehensive and holistic manner, encompassing the interdisciplinary and intersectoral interfaces of CRVS system. So in addition to that, he also coordinates the UN legal identity, which is aimed at establishing a mechanism for conferring legal identity to all in a continuous, universal, and inclusive manner from birth to death. Yeah, so you can see already there quite a heavy kind of CV, and the reason why we are bringing him in is also because he does from the work. There's a lot of administrative data that's been curated from civil registration and also other activities. So without further ado, I'll ask William to come in and give a presentation for 15 minutes. William, please.
Thank you, Oliver. Leandro, you can upload the presentation I sent. I think that will be, because we had to shut off one of the computers since I'm sitting with Sadiq. While you are uploading, I think, let me just go to the background of why we have started moving into national population registers. We use the acronym NPR. I think the issue of COVID has actually been talked about quite a lot since the introduction by Oliver and by Sadiq. So one of the things which we discovered, which we sort of experienced during the COVID was a lot of postponement on the census and on civil registration. Births, deaths, and any other vital events were not being recorded. People were not going to civil registration offices. So civil registration, which was supposed to be our basis for actually reporting what was going on in the COVID or during the COVID era, couldn't even give us that information. So at the end of the COVID pandemic, one of the questions which was really raised was the inadequacy of civil registration to respond to emergencies. And we actually had to think of a method which would actually help us with that. Then we actually also have the issue of, in Africa, almost about 500 million people are not recognized by their states because they have no legal identity, and which is actually a problem. So a project was initiated on the UN legal ID. And one of the things which has been emphasized on the UN legal ID is the interoperability of systems. So we saw an opportunity here to say, already we are advocating for an interoperable system for identities. And this would be very easy to convert into a national population register. And we know that for sure, for reasons also given, that we are trying to move the African continent towards register-based censuses, which is quite a very insurmountable task, because the difficulty, let's say, for rural areas to have addresses and whatever, are so much. But with very good civil registration systems, and ID management systems, we actually can circumvent some of those. So we are looking at how can we harness the benefits we have actually gotten in civil registration system in identities to actually, move into this field of national population register. Next slide, please. So we looked at the UN definition of national population register, which is actually records of all residents in the country together with their basic demographic information and updates for births, deaths, changes of marital status, international migration, and so forth. And while I'm at that definition, it also points out on the best database which we'll use. Everybody here knows that, censuses cannot be used for that. Norway, I think, or Denmark, one of them used their censuses, but it was very long back. The law hadn't even kicked on, but they wouldn't even do it the same now because of the law. And this is where we are in a very, interesting situation, which we'll actually try to. And it's a matter of going into each country and see which is the most, let's say, usable database, which you can use as your base, then start now populating it and, managing it with the civil registration system. So there's a lot of homework which needs to be done there. Next slide. So we have two types of registers: administrative registers and statistical registers, which are actually defined on the next, slide. So our administrative registers are what we find a lot of what, let's say, Sadiq has actually, outlined, where you actually have, insurance, you have tax, those are administrative registers. And our statistical register can be derived directly from there, because you now possibly eliminate things like the, name, or all these other strings and so forth. Next slide. So what has driven us to population registers? Firstly, there's an increasing demand for robust, timely, frequent, and disaggregated population data and other, data in the context of the SDGs. So, for example, countries which are having their censuses 7 years before the end of the SDGs, that will not be usable really to measure, and we know that censuses measure almost all the SDGs. They provide the denominators and quite a lot of, but we would need a replication of a census to the period near the end of the SDGs. Then secondly, there have been concerns over traditional methods of data collection. I think the cost, Sadiq has really demonstrated that the cost can be reduced. At the average now for doing a census in Africa is about $5 per head. And if it can be reduced to less than $1, that's almost like a 75% or 85% reduction in the cost. Then many African governments are already undertaking efforts to implementing administrative population registers. So we actually saw that there were attempts in a number of countries, and we did a quick survey. It was a situation analysis to just give us an indication of what we should do. I won't go into those results because one of the things really we saw was the definition of the population census was actually determined by the respondents, which is the countries. And whatever they thought was a national population register, they said, we do. And they actually reported it so. But we had very useful recommendations from that study, from that situation. Now, that's part I will concentrate on. So firstly, the study, next slide, the study found that no country has attained a population register which aligns to the definition set by the UN. That's very fundamental. I think because we missed Seychelles. Seychelles actually has a very good database, and we missed Egypt in the responses. So that was the first finding. No country, especially on the, those south of the Sahara, has attained a population rate. So it's a very significant finding. Secondly, despite the non-existence of complete, fully fledged registers as defined by the UN, the study confirmed that there's a great interest among African countries to establish or further develop their existing registers. So if we complement this with the last points which Sadiq mentioned, then we can actually see that Africa at least is prepared and is ripe to move into population registers. Then the study highlighted the inadequacies in the capturing of international migration, which most African countries even struggle with, even in censuses or in immigration. And this is something we really need to think about as we move into population registers. How are we going to manage migration? The study did not delve into understanding the quality of data held in the existing registers, which we also now intend to do, like South Africa, and I think Malawi and so forth, and there are quite a number of countries which mentioned that what they have. So we just want to see what's inside those. Then the use of the data held in the population register for statistical purposes remain wanting. I mean, it's very deficient. We observed that. The study recommends that such usage is encouraged as it is instrumental in improving the quality of the data. So even where we actually observed the inadequacies, we encouraged these countries to sort of use them to assess if they run frequencies, if they run closed tab, can they actually see where their data are actually, lying? Next slide, Leandro, you're about one slide behind. Go to, I think, the last slide, next step. So the next steps, what we have concluded from this study is we need to complete this study. We did include a lot of the French-speaking countries and countries in the North African region. I think, as I said, we know Egypt is a very good functional register, population register. We need to determine the reasons why existing registers fail to cover international migration and document challenges, differences in country practices in addressing this thematic area. Because a national population register cannot be accurate, especially if it doesn't take into account migration, because people who are outside the country or even they will still remain there. So it becomes a very conflated database. So we actually need to think about how migration will be handled, determine the linkage of population registers with other administrative data systems, that's the interoperability I've been talking about. Then develop resources to support assessment of the coverage, completeness, and quality of data held. This will be a very easy exercise for us because we have actually been developing tools to assess coverage for civil registration, completeness for civil registration, quality for civil registration, and these definitely apply to national population register. So let me conclude by mentioning where we want to go. Though we are still far from complete, the existing administrative population register among African countries, they actually provide a good foundation for making advances. So we just thought that where they've made an attempt, why not start working with them to actually make sure they improve their national population registers, taking into account the UN statistical divisions, recommendations. So we have very great potential. I think from my estimation, we actually had about 18 to 20 countries which have some form of a population register, but not adequate and so forth. So if we look at a couple of these and start working with them, that will even be better. Then the increased uptake of national identity systems in most countries, identity has really risen. And that's where we obtain our unique identification number. So this is quite an opportunity. Then countries are encouraged to maximize on the technical and other resources available from the UN partners, including the Upper Sierra VS initiative, with the partners to actually move towards national population registers. I think it's something which we'll actually discuss also at this meeting, which we have all the major partners working in Sierra VS on the continent and say, how do we transition to national population register? And to conclude, let me end by thanking Statistics Norway for accepting to collaborate with ECA on the work in Malawi, so that we can also learn from the system, which we can now use to roll out in a number of those countries, the 18 or 20 countries, which have at least indicated that they are interested in the national population registers. So thank you so much. We really look to work in collaboration with Statistics Norway. We have had a couple of meetings prior, and now that there is also this joint project which Leandre is leading, then we can see how to harness that project and work on the NPR. Thank you. Over to you, Oliver.
Thank you so much, William. I think, again, very useful presentation. You can see what is already there. He has also talked about in some countries where they have some sort of registers. And I think it gives an opportunity that at least we're not starting from zero. We can start and build on what has already been prepared or what is existing and borrowing on the experience of Norway. I think all I can say, Sadiq, is that, definitely I think ECA would like to work with you to see how we can work with a few countries to develop the mechanism of coming up with these registers. I think we have in mind a few countries, I think, where this thing is possible. But I think with your support, we should be able to demonstrate that we can do better. And I think this is more important for us now. If you look at the 2020 round, we are talking about only 28 countries have undertaken the census. At the end of this, at the end of August, the 2020 round will be done. And we have done really a disfavor to ourselves by not conducting censuses in all countries. So maybe with the population register, a mechanism of collecting administrative data will be an answer to some of these issues we are facing. It is very likely that this financial crisis, it's going to continue even in next round. And I don't see countries having the finances to procure all what is required to be able to run the census. So that's what I can say. With the two presentations, I think there's a lot of resonance there. I do want to ask that remind you again that you put your questions and comments in the chat. We don't have much time, but because this is a very important subject, I think it's important that we open some conversation now. And those that have questions, and I will ask Leandra maybe to help me, and those that are here to help me look at the questions that are in the chat, and maybe where we're able to answer the questions in the chat, please do answer, the people from the Africa Center for Statistics, and we allow perhaps some critical questions that are already there. You can highlight them to me. We can bring them to bear so that the questions can be asked. Yeah, please. So the floor is open. I'm just going to check what is in the chat so far.
There's one question to Jane. What is the basic strategy of statistics Norway to have good relationship with data owner?
Thank you, Leandre. So I think part of it is to have a close dialogue to make sure that we meet on a regular basis, also at the top management level. So we have formal agreements with the data owners, and the top management are meeting at an annual basis. And then in addition, we have the technical working groups meeting also more regularly, and we establish working groups as needed. So I think having regular dialogue at different levels is essential to make sure that we improve the relationship. And I think in the starting phase, you might also have to sell in the importance of statistics and the benefit to the data owner for actually sharing data. So this, I think, has been our strategy, and to always continue thinking of how we can improve the relation and not take it for granted. So I think that's the short answer on this one. So thank you.
Let me follow up also a question, Jan, on this. Yes. In terms of what you talked about having to share information with the users themselves. How did you manage to do that? First of all, for the users to be able to buy in, that means they believe that what you're providing them was good data, and they were able to use it. So I don't know whether it was an issue of demonstrating the economic value for data. What was really the mechanism? How did you manage to show them that this data is important for them to begin to agree with you in the MOUs?
So for when it comes to the data owners, those having the registers, I think they did not use their administrative data to the extent they could because the quality was not good enough. So when they realized we could help them improve their own registers, it also make them use them to a larger extent, which also increased the quality. So I think it's one of these positive enforcing circles. When more use ensures that quality improves, and giving the feedback also then improve the quality. So I think for the public administration, like the population register, to be able to use this is also a benefit for the general public. And when it comes to businesses, it's very important for them to not have to report the same information more than once. So now, for example, it's been a very general agreement that let's report once. So now we get the employees, they are sending out the income information about all employees to Statistics Norway, to the tax authorities, and to the social service in one form, and they send it once a month, and we all get it. So this also saves them time, and it improves also then the general access of information to everyone. So that's one example of how it works.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Leandro, any follow-up question on that, please?
Yes, just a question addressed to Sadiq. The first one is how can we manage administrative statistics in places where internal displacement, migration, and rural to urban displacement is common, especially in the Horn of African countries?
No, thank you very much for yes. No, I think anywhere there is a high number of displacement, there's always a problem and there's always an issue. But then what happens is that we normally have the data before displacement, and so you find when I was working with UNHCR, you see that a lot of situations where pre-displacement data is also actually used. And so you get a district where people are registered. I mean, you have the number and you have the year, and then when they are displaced, of course, you can pick the pre-displaced data as well. But at the same time, people constantly on the move is also a major problem. And registering these people becomes quite cumbersome and expensive. But I think that is where innovation comes in. New innovation, technologies that are coming in probably can help with that. And the most important is to really to see what data sources are out there. Sometimes you find displaced populations, you don't really have to go to them to really start collecting the data. Maybe there's data already somewhere that we can use, even though they have moved. And so, the response there is not a direct one. It's very, very challenging, but I think we can look at pre-displacement data sources, and then we see whether any other agencies, because that's what we found. You see, in displacement situations, there are many actors involved. You might find that some organizations have got data, and you go collecting the data again. And so I think the most important is to bring all partners together and then to do the data assessment and to see who has what. And I think on most situations, you find that some organization, it can be an NGO, it can be government, it can be international, already has data on these displaced populations, yes. So it's a matter of cooperation as well there and data integration. Over.
Thank you. Next question to Sadiq. You have mentioned the PIN code as the linking key of individual information for various sources. How can individual data, especially on economic transactions, be traced? Could this include day-to-day spendings? What other complementary surveys are needed to produce statistics, especially economic statistics?
Yes, the unique number, it's like I said, it's many individuals, industries, individuals, businesses, and then households. So of course, I mean, your income, if registered, legal income registered, of course, it goes to the national tax system. So we know how much we know how much you you are earning. In terms of expenditure, in terms of tracing expenditure, of course, that is a little bit, that's where maybe big data comes in. In terms of the use of cards, I mean, in most societies, they are going towards a cashless society, right? So people use, in like Kenya, M-Pesa is very, in other places, Momo. And so where I mean, electronic data can be tested, but of course, there are regulations as well. So it's not really easy out there. And that is why, I mean, expenditures, it's still probably, it could be like surveys to see what you use your money on. Of course, there are situations. I remember in South Africa, they are using administrative data and big data to really see from shops, for example, I mean, in terms of receipts and what people buy. And so there are some data there, but I think in the African context where some of these systems are not very well developed, we still have to supplement. And so, yes, we need to supplement surveys and then administrative data to be able, that's where data integration actually works, to see that we know how much you earn, but what do you normally use your money for? That we can get, but maybe the regulations are not in place to be able to capture this big data. And so there'll be need to actually do some surveys to complement that, to be able to trace transactions. So.
Okay, next question. It was mentioned, I don't know if it's Sadiq or William, but it was mentioned in the presentation that the self-assessment is a basic mechanism for trust in statistics. What are the mechanisms followed to conduct self-assessment evaluation? How the tools are developed and updated? I think it should go to.
Yes, I think I mentioned.
Sadiq.
Yeah, yes, I think I mentioned it. I mentioned the self-assessment in the quality aspect. That we have it in the framework. And so when we have the dialogue, like Jan said, with our data producers, then the quality aspect as well. So there are written frameworks as to what are the quality needs, how do we assess it, and so these are what we mean by the assessing the data that comes in. In terms of our self-assessment, we ourselves will look into our systems and to see, I mean, how fast we edit our systems, how often do we, so we are always trying to improve our system. For example, we collect the data, how fast can we be able to process data at a low cost, and then we disseminate the data, and we see all these processes and to see how best we are doing it. And then we also look at our own gaps as well. In terms of our self-evaluation, that's where we bring in the peer review, where other institutions evaluate statistics in Norway. So they come in as peer reviewers and look into our systems. And so there are several levels of it. And so the self-assessment I'm talking about is really with us and our data producers. For Statistics Norway as an institution, of course, then institutions that are outside Statistics Norway also comes in as peer reviewers to come and review our systems as well and come in processes. So there are several aspects of that as well. And there are laid down regulations, both the European statistics and the UNSD also, in how these peer reviews go about. And I remember in the heads of African statistics meeting in Addis that I attended, they mentioned this about peer reviews as well. So there are a number of African countries as well that are also would also go through this level of peer reviews. That's assessment from outside. Over.
Yeah, but just to add on, I think, Leandro, just to add on, I think one of the things that need to be considered is this, what are they called? The surveys on satisfaction. You know, what are they have a nice name they're given. I mean, the surveys whether clients are actually satisfied with the products that we produce, which is more or less like, you know, engagement service that we run. It's one way of gauging whether the clients want, they like what we want, and if there anything that we need to improve. And eventually you begin to ask questions whether to be good for them or they'll be available for them to, you know, share information. So I think there are many mechanisms. I think one of them is what Sadiq said. I think would be very useful to gauge the satisfaction of the clients. Leander?
Yes, sir. A few additional questions. Maybe let me go to William and we come back to Sadiq with one question in French. For William, Chief William, please can the presenter talk more on the limitation of population registers? And the next question to William, the integration of statistics is very vital. What are the platform and mechanisms to follow data integration from different sources?
Okay, I think Sadiq also pointed out there are quite some limitations, but they can be overcome. Firstly, is to make sure at least there is a good collection of the data producers who cover the total population. That's very, very critical because if you have your data sources and let's say they leave children 0 to 1, then it's problematic. But if you had an immunization database which comes in, which is actually part of that, then it covers the whole population. And so you actually have to be very tactful in the sense that, you know, and the other limitation, I think we have talked about it, is migration. How migration is, we know African borders are porous. And this is where I actually like, you know, one of the suggestions on, you know, artificial intelligence, because even if people are jumping borders, they have their cell phones. And we can use that data and say, this person crossed the border, and we actually, it's picked and put in the database. So there are a lot of there's a lot of thinking which we'll put into that to actually make sure we use all those innovative, you know, methods to make sure it's accurate. Because if it is inaccurate, usually the problem with these databases, if they are not managed properly, they actually inflate the figures rather than deflate the figures. There's usually no underestimation, it's overestimated. If somebody has died and they remain there, it's +1. If somebody has moved to another country and is not taken out, it's +1. So it ends up ballooning. And those are some of the indications to the people who manage the database and say, oh, this seems to be an impossible you know, population you are now deriving from. And this also actually now talks to the issue of having a lighter census, which will actually be used as your benchmark. So in our discussion, please, we should actually make sure in our minds we are not saying we are going to substitute censuses. We are not going to stop censuses, but they'll become cheaper. Because otherwise we have to start dealing with the Census Act, which we have to go through the parliament for it to be repealed and whatever. But I don't think even the US still has its census. So that will remain, but it will be far, far cheaper because there are some variables you don't even need to collect if they are available in the National Population Register. They are just populated. The moment you link the household, the information of those members of the household they are brought in, their sex and their ages, because you can only age 1 year. So if we are doing for next year, 2025, we know this person is +1, and that can actually be. Then at the end, possibly after, when you do your decennial census, you still find is William still plus the number of years which they were in the last census. So there will also be these cross-checkings and so forth, which will be built into the systems, especially for our African populations, because there are a few uncertainties which we need to deal with, migration being one of them, then underreporting of births. So if we are having underreported births, we will be feeding less people into the national population register. If there's underestimation of death rate, we are actually leaving a lot of dead people in the national population registers. But it's a procedure which will start very carefully. We'll start with 2 or 3 countries, collaborate with our partners, Statistics Norway, and also I think Statistics Denmark is interested in this as part of the project which Leandre is handling. So we can actually look at some of these limitations. For national population registers, fortunately, they are correctable. It's not like a census. Once you make a mistake and it has gone into the database, it's very difficult to go back into the field and correct it. But because we are continuously updating, if we see that we have given the level of education to the wrong person, it can be corrected and so forth and so forth. Thank you, Leandre.
Thank you. Question to Sadiq, it is in French. I hope you have selected English language on your site.
And that will be the last question because we've gone over by a couple of minutes. Huh?
Yeah, sure. Leanne, can you please translate for me then? Putting you on the spot, sorry.
Can you take interpretation and choose English from the interpretation bottom? Because it's basically, anyway, the question is about in the context in the context in an African context. They have several challenges with administrative data, including methodological challenges and the coverage, and then they sometimes need to go on the field to collect data. So the person want to know if you have some experience from African country that face this issue and how they address it in terms of getting good administrative data from sectoral administration.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I think there are several examples. And like you said, the major problem about the administrative data here is also the classification and definitions, and that is why the African Union and South Africa, they are all working on to these projects for harmonization. So really, basically, you can have a register, it can be the data, but are we talking about the same things, the unit of measurement? Are we talking about the same population? So I think these aspects of having common concepts and things that becomes like the first level to be able to see what are you collecting? Is it comparable? Can you use this data? This is the first one, yeah. And then the other aspect also to see the various institutions themselves. What are they collecting and are they also making use of the data that we have? Like I said, during the migration project that we're part of, we included some elements of migration data, for example, in resident permits, students that have been crossed the border to study. And then, of course, there are some other labor indicators as well. And some of these can, of course, be found in administrative registers. What also helped us was also the COVID aspect. And this also, even for populations that were stateless. During the COVID time, for example, people were registered for PPEs and vaccinations. And of course, because there was a health scare, people who normally were not included in registers were actually registered so that they can protect the other populations. And so you can go and collect the data. And like William also said here, sometimes immunization data could even be kind of basis. And so you don't go out there to collect fresh data. You see what is available. Are there any data that can have the basic variables and concept that we need? Is there data available? And how does that data also come in terms of harmonization? And then so that to avoid a double reporting, because basically you want to, like you say, you don't want to inflate the data. You want to have correct data. So where they are nothing, then of course you can now determine how do we go to the field to collect. What we want to avoid is that data that actually could be used in register, we go and collect the same data out there. And so the first one is to see the harmonization aspect, the concept, the definitions, the classifications aspect. Secondly, we see what is in these registers as well, and to see can this be used. And then if we find out this cannot be used, then of course, then we then go on to see whether there's need for extra data collection. Over. But it has been used in Africa. I mean, it has been used, and like I said, South Africa is actually considering using administrative sources for like the consumption model, for example, where instead of going to this heavy aspect of going to the basket, the food basket aspect, you really could see receipts and what has been bought and prices, for example, to cut across instead of the heavy surveys on consumption. So there are many things that are happening on the continent, and there are many examples as well. The time is too short to go into it, but there are a lot happening on the African continent that can be improved.
I think it's very clear that this is a webinar that probably we need to repeat in a different context, Leandro, because it's very, very important that we begin to sensitize and socialize the countries to move away from the way they're doing business now and they embrace much more the admin data. The example of South Africa and many others that are doing similar things, I think are things that we should emulate and see how we can support them with that. So really very useful. And with William's work that he's doing also in this would be a better way of augmenting, show results. And maybe during the StatsTalk meeting this year, towards the end, maybe that's we should have a session, a full session on this, where countries that are doing this work already on administrative data should lead beyond the panel to discuss how they're doing and share their experience with others. Yeah, I would like to really bring this to a close now. But before we go to the close, I would like to ask Leandra if you could share the link on the evaluation questionnaire in the chat box so that we can get feedback. Again, to improve anything is, the only way you can improve anything is to share feedback and tell you what you have not done right and how we probably should do things better in the future, and suggestions of how next things that must be included in the presentation would be very useful. So if you could share that chat, Leandra, the link in the chat, that would be very useful. So as we conclude, really, I want again to thank everyone that is here for really taking time to be part of this space today, where we talk about issues on data, innovative tools. But today we had an interesting conversation on administrative data. And I think lessons learned from Statistics Norway are critical in ensuring that we begin to think very hard in how we can use admin data to be part of the statistical value chain on the continent. How we can begin to trust the data that comes from administrative data, take into account all the the flaws, the disadvantages that are surrounding, the challenges that are surrounding it, but also how we can engage with those that have a custodian of administrative data. What kind of mechanism? Given that there are legislations, for instance, with the revenue authorities, with the police, with the immigration, and many other departments, including commerce and industry, how can we have these MOUs? So maybe one of the things, Leandro, we should be asking to work with the student is, could they share with us some kind of prototype MOUs that we can begin to look at very critically and see if this can also can be used. I see that an opportunity even for us at the Africa Center for Statistics, where we go into MOUs with other agencies that keep data so that we can enhance our own database on a similar lines. So I want to say that this particular platform that we have, I think it's something that we want to encourage many others to come in the future, including SADC. And if you have anything else that you'd like to share in the future, please would like to ask you to come over and share your insights on this. We are planning the next webinar sometime in February. The date will be communicated. I think we're already quite advanced in terms of what is going to be discussed during that webinar. So one thing maybe that we take out from this particular webinar is the issue of modernizing administrative data for statistical purposes. I think it's very clear that the challenges that are there are not insurmountable. We can deal with them. They can be dealt. So I'd like to thank Ian, Sadiq, and William for the really very helpful presentation that we made today. The intervention from Ian as well in terms of the work he's done at Stats Norway. Sadiq, the work that you've done in many places, including in Africa, and William, the work that you do on population registers. Really want to thank you that. I also want to thank the interpreters that are here. But more importantly, all this would not have been possible if we didn't have the participants that have been part of this. I think if I recall at some point, we had up to 118 or more. I don't know, there could be more. I'm sure the others that are probably sitting more than one on one particular computer. So they're actually much more, but I did register in excess of 118 people that joined. So thank you very much. We're looking forward to you joining us in the next session that is going to be in February. And I think that session is going to be around building inclusive IDs. Again, not leaving no one behind. So there'll be quite a lot of discussion around that. So thank you very much. Have a good day and all the very best wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Cool. Hey, Joseph.
Thank you. Bye-bye.